Well, the hymn that we just heard, O Come, Emmanuel, is about 1,200 years old. It has an interesting origin story. In the way back in the weeks leading up, the week leading up to Christmas, monks would sing one verse each day, kind of one per day for the 6 days leading up to Christmas. And it would be one of the verses that started with O, like O come, Emmanuel. And it came to be known as the O antiphons. And at some point, I imagine the monk worship team got together and they said, hey, you know how we like singing that thing before Christmas, kind of that one verse per day. What if we put all the verses together into one song? And I imagine that the monk worship team did what all worship teams do. They went and they told their monk pastor, hey, we've got an idea. We want to run it past you. We think you'll like it. You know that the antiphons that we sing before Christmas, we want to sing them all together. And the monk pastor probably said, because this is what pastors say to worship team people, that's a horrible idea. Well, that'll never catch on. We'll never go for it. But I'll let you try. I'll let you try it. And we've been singing it that way for the past 1,200 years since then, and translated into English sometime in the 1800s, and one of the most popular hymns of the Christian faith. And I think one of the reasons why it's so popular is in the structure of each verse. There is an identification of the Messiah, a particular description of the Messiah from the Old Testament, like the rod of Jesse, the dayspring, and then related to the description, there is a prayer about how the people of God hope that the King of God will work to save them, to ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile. And it wasn't just Israel in the Old Testament that experienced exile. There is a sense in which God's people are always not yet home, that we are all in exile somehow. And so it resonates with us, or to make known to us the path of knowledge and teach us the way that we should go, or make safe for us the heavenward road and bar the way to death's abode. This resonates with us because the concerns of centuries past are common to people, right? There are concerns too. And so tonight we hear about and we worship the Emmanuel who did come and who will come back. And we seek from the same Emmanuel this continuing saving work in the right here and the right now. And my goal for just the next couple of minutes is to look at John's gospel and to understand a few of the ways that the Savior whose birth we celebrate came to save us, and then to apply that saving work to us tonight. So first, we meet the Word who is God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. These were revolutionary words describing a revolutionary truth as John, the gospel writer, came to understand them and came to tell us that there is a Word of God who is somehow equivalent to, but distinct from God the Father, that He's equal in divinity to God the Father. And we see this in several different ways, that He was distinct, that He was with God, that He was God, that He was in the beginning with God, that He was distinguishable from God, but that He is equivalent in divinity to God. Not only is He distinct from God, but He is distinctively personal, that He does things that only God can do. For instance, all things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. That this Word is as responsible for creation as God is responsible for creation. That God the Father is creator of life, that God the Word is creator of life. So right off, as we come on Christmas Eve and we think of the incarnation of the Word of God into the world that God made, we are confronted by a revolutionary reality. and it is a revolutionarily hopeful reality, which is where John goes next in verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This word overcome is a word that has both a positive and a negative connotation. When it appears in the Bible, it can describe things like winning, or negatively, it can describe things like a disaster overtaking someone. And this is where right away the gospel story takes a darker and realistic turn. That the Word created the world and it was good. That the Word created life and it was good. And then darkness entered in. And we could, I suppose, each of us build a long list of darknesses in the world, and some of them would be common and some of them would be personal to our experience. But John cuts to the chase in verse 10, where he says that he was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. There is the darkness of ignorance about God. And there is yet even more darkness, that the people who were most well poised to know the Word, because they had the Old Testament Word, didn't understand him. John continues in verse 11, that he came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. So there was ignorance of the Creator, and there was a rejection of the Creator, and that would describe spiritual darkness. But the good news of Christmas is that hope is not lost. That Christmas is a time to be realistic about these things, and also hopeful that the darkness has not overcome. That's one thing that we celebrate tonight, not only here on Post Road in Dublin, but everywhere where the church gathers. In whatever circumstance, whether more or less prosperous, whether more or less advantaged, whether more or less welcome, that wherever Jesus' people gather, we testify to the reality that darkness has not overcome the work of the Word, as God said it would not. 600 years before the first Christmas Eve, God, through a prophet named Isaiah, said this: there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, which were two regions of Israel. But in the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. God promised that a child would come who would be a light. And this child, as he was born, would be to us a son given. And the government would be on his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The Word, who is God and who is doing what only God can do, is also this long-awaited promised child. He is Emmanuel. He is Jesse's rod. He is the day spring. He is the light. He is the Lord of might, and he is worthy of these holy titles. And hope becomes even more clear when we ask and when we answer the question about why the Word came into the world. Well, the Word came with authority to build God's family. Anyone can claim to be on a mission from God, I suppose. History is full of stories, and movies are full of stories of people who claim to be on missions from God. Which is why God sent a witness in advance of the Word. We read about that. John the Baptist, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. So John the Baptist, a popular figure in the first century world, had this role to point to the Word, to point to the Messiah, and to say, there he is. That when he comes and when he claims to be on a mission from God, God has sent me in advance of that, to the advance party, if you will, to say, there he is, that light has come in to the darkness. But the question is why? Why has light come into darkness? Well, John answers that question in an artistic way. And I debated with myself this week about whether to go down this rabbit trail with you, but you're here, and so I will. And I think a good way to go down this rabbit trail with you is to picture a sandwich, which you might be thinking is a good idea at about 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve to picture a sandwich. You could even picture your favorite sandwich. Apologies to the gluten-free among us, I suppose. But you've got 2 slices of bread, and then you've got maybe a layer of cheese, and then you've got maybe on the bottom a layer of another thing. But in the middle of the sandwich, right, is the main thing. This is how sandwiches are done, right? Like, I'm not wrong. Help me out here. It's Christmas Eve. The important thing's in the middle of the sandwich. You're like, where's this going? In the first century world and beyond, there was, in the world before, kind of boldface and italics. When you were writing something, there were artistic ways to tell your readers what the main point was. And one of the strategies that writers would use would be to write down kind of a word sandwich. There'd be a layer, and then another layer, and another layer, and then the really important thing would be in the middle. I think I put that on the slide. Yeah, see, there it is. It looks a lot like a sandwich. You have an interesting idea, a second interesting idea. You have a unique idea that is not repeated, and then as you come to the bottom of the sandwich, the ideas are restated. This pattern exists in John 1-18. And what it does is it shows us the main point that John is trying to make. Next slide. I think we have it up there. Yeah. So the Word is a divine person who reveals God. John the Baptist is a witness to the Word. The Word came into the world. And then the central unique point, and then repeated, the Word is in the world. John the Baptist. The Word is a divine person who has a name, which means that the central point that John is trying to make is the point which is unique and not repeated, and that is in verses 12-13. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Think about that just for a moment. That the central point of not only what John is writing about, but the central point of why we are here tonight is that God has a plan to send the Word into the world to gather for himself a family that belongs to him by believing in him. This is the central focus of the Word. Now, the mechanics of how that happens requires the rest of the gospel story to fill into the blank. But I want you to hear that tonight, because you might be back at church for the first time in a long time. Or you might be regularly at church, but you might come to church and you might have that nagging feeling like, do I really fit in here? When you see that the central point that John is making, that question is answered for you. Whether it's your first time in a long time or your last time in a long series, that the Word is in the business on behalf of God to come into the world to gather for God a family, not a family of perfect people, not a family of people who've got their whole act together, but a family of people who have themselves, and I could say it for myself, who have walked in darkness, but who need to see this light. That's what the Word is doing. That's where hope comes from. And we see, thirdly, that the Word who comes is the Word who thoroughly saves. This is the verse that Patrick and the children consider just for a moment. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. It's interesting, on Christmas Eve, some of the gospel writers, and we read Luke's account, we heard it for us from Luke chapter 2. Some of the gospel writers are interested in the how of Christmas Eve. How did it happen? But John is interested in the why. The Word became flesh. Why? Why did the Word have to become flesh? Well, the Word took to himself, by becoming incarnate and born as Jesus of Nazareth, the Word took to himself all that humans are, physically, mentally, emotionally. He took to himself all of who we are so that he could save every aspect of us that needs saving. That he could save us physically, that he could save us mentally, that he could save us spiritually. He has a body to save people whose bodies break down. He has a soul to save people who have sinful souls. And so far, that's all of us, right? Because all of our bodies are going to break down. All of our souls have a sin problem. He has a mind to save troubled minds. He has the full gamut of human emotions to save us in our disordered emotions. The Word became flesh, and he dwelt among us. Dwelling captures a special component of God's Old Testament plan. For instance, God said in the way back story in Exodus, I will dwell among the people of Israel and will be their God. And they shall know that I am the Lord their God, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, that I might dwell with them. God saves his people because he's interested in being with his people. He saves his people because he wants to be with his people. I wonder, again, I don't know, but I wonder if that might be a new thought for you. I wonder if that might reorient your basic conception of who God is. Perhaps you've come and you thought, well, God is standoffish. Jesus I can relate to, but God is standoffish. But it's in Jesus that God reveals his desire to be with his people. Put it all together, the Word becomes flesh to save all of who you are, because he wants to be with you. You are thoroughly savable. That which is dark in you, that which is dark in me, is forgivable. But the dwell amongst us means not just that we are savable, but that we are wantable. That the Father wants to be with you. And he takes eternally great pains to be with you. Actual you. The real you. And with so much at stake, a fair question to ask would be, how can we know who the Word is? Which is really how the passage ends. The Word has eyewitnesses, verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have seen his glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father. The we are the people who lived with Jesus. Like, we saw him. We talked with him. We hung out with him. We were eyewitnesses to him. But the Word that we saw was a Word that was full of glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. In other words, they said, when we saw the Word, we saw the family resemblance of the Lord of heaven. You know, one of the things that is fun to be in a church for a long time. This is my 18th year here, and with the children's choir, you know, like I know a lot of their moms and dads. And I look at them and I'm saying, oh, I know, I can see what family you're from. You've got the family resemblance. That's what they were saying about the Word, that the Word has the family resemblance, not because of how he looked on the outside. On the outside, he looked just like a regular man. They said he didn't even look like a particularly beautiful man. He had no form or majesty that we would desire him. But in his character, he was full of grace and he was full of truth, which is how God described himself in the Old Testament to Moses. When he wanted to make himself known to Moses, he declared to Moses that he was the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. In other words, grace and truth. So that when people saw the Word, they saw God's character displayed, not just a little bit. You know, like I might display a little bit of God's character every now and then. But they saw it on manifold display. That everything he did was thoroughly and completely displaying the character of God. The Word who was with God in the beginning, who's distinctively divine, who does what only God can, who prioritizes gathering God's family, who comes to save and to allow God to dwell with his people, has a name. For the law was given, John says, through Moses. Grace and truth came through King Jesus, Jesus Christ. He has a name, which means that he is knowable. In fact, it's knowing him, it's believing in him that we come into this salvation. John says, no one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side has made him known. This word side is a word that I usually think about spatially. Like you're sitting beside someone. You think of the word coming from the side of the Father. But it could equally be translated lap or bosom, which only serves to show us that he comes in intimate association with the Father. That he comes intimately. Maybe the best English expression is from the heart of the Father. That it is the heart of the Father to send the word, to gather the family, so that we could know that we are savable and that we are wantable. This is the word who we celebrate tonight. And perhaps it is that you're here and you think, well, I don't know if I've ever understood that I'm savable. I don't know if I've ever understood that I'm wantable, but it actually sounds pretty good. Because I know I need saving. And it's remarkable that the God of the universe would want to spend time with me. How do I get this? Well, it just says right here, to all who receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. That's all that's required. You know, we talked about it on Sunday morning past, but just in case you weren't here tomorrow morning or maybe later tonight, you'll exchange gifts. And you'll give a gift to someone. And all you want for them to do when you give them the gift is for them to receive it. And maybe if they're really on their game and have had enough coffee, they'll say thank you. It's the same way. You can't earn Jesus. You can't impress Jesus. But you don't need to. He came to bring you into God's family. All you need to do is to believe on him and to receive him. Maybe that'll be your response tonight. We are going to, in just a moment, light candles. We're going to sing Silent Night. We're going to end with Joy to the World. And it might be in the singing that you're inclined to respond to him and to understand that what we celebrate tonight, we celebrate really on your behalf as you come to believe in the Word who came among us.